Thank you for being here today. We'll get started in about a minute or so and we'll get going. Thanks for being here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. For time purposes, we have a lot of stuff to cover for today. First, I want to make sure to recognize and thank our sponsor, Nurture Smart. They sponsored this webinar for today, so we are so thankful for their support. Um, our webinar for today is Balancing Parenthood. So talking all about what it's like to not only be a parent in healthcare, but a parent who's trying to build a career in child life as well. So we have four incredible panelists that are here today who have extensive backgrounds working in child life and also being parents. Before we jump into that, I do have a great guest here today. We have Susan here from Caring Bridge, and she's going to be sharing just for a few minutes a little bit about Caring Bridge with all of you today.
Thanks, Carissa. I really appreciate the opportunity to share Caring Bridge with everyone today. Really what Caring Bridge does, if you're not familiar with it, it surrounds people with support at every step of the health journey. Next slide, please. So Caring Bridge is a no-cost, nonprofit communication health platform for family caregivers and the loved ones they support on a health journey. It's really Facebook on steroids. I mean, that's sort of the easiest way to describe it. It's ad-free, it's secure, data is not sold, and the person starting the site controls the privacy settings. It's really easy to share health updates with everyone all at the same time on Caring Bridge and organize and activate a support network. That's really what it's for. It can be used for any health condition and age. However, you do need to be 18 years old to start a Caring Bridge page. Pediatrics is a top health condition with many hospitals sharing Caring Bridge today. It's available on desktop, mobile phone, and tablet. Next, please. Caring Bridge is a 26-year-old nonprofit. Our vision has remained the same, a world where no one goes through a health journey alone. Over those 26 years, and when we started, Mark Zuckerberg was 13 years old. So we believe we were the first social network platform, but we can't really prove that. But in the 26 years, we've had 2.5 billion visits with nearly 1 million free Caring Bridge pages created. There's 1,600 messages of love, hope, and compassion posted every hour. 73% of pages are started by a family caregiver. 90% of the funding comes from the people who use Caring Bridge. Those people starting a page, their families and visitors, and the average donation is around $60. We're about an $11.5 million nonprofit. And 76 of Caring Bridge users are on a mobile device. So mobile is really important to our users. Next slide. It only takes a few minutes to start a page. You can read the steps for yourself. And then on the bottom, the half circle there, one of the beauties of Caring Bridge is that you get to control who sees your page. So right now it's lit up in pink, so that means it's on all registered users. So anyone registered with Caring Bridge can see your page once you create it. Or if you choose the one in the middle, that means anyone can see your page, and it's searchable in browsers and social media, but only registered users can comment on your page. And then, like many of our users who are just doing this for the first time, they'll keep it on approved visitors only to start and just share it with a handful of people. And they can toggle back and forth between these three settings at any given point in time. Next slide. So on this slide, it's just describes how it's really easy to invite family and friends to a page. You copy your page URL, and depending on the site setting, you invite people by sharing the URL to your page through email, text, and social media. Caring Bridge can also send out an email invite to visitors. You just have to add them to the email box to the right, their email address, and we can send that out for you. Next page. So this is what a homepage looks like. Caring Bridge is completely templated, so it really only takes like 3 minutes to set up a page. You can add the background photo. Otherwise, we have like 600 background photos that you can use. It's just a drag and drop. You can also add your own photo. That would be the circle photo. So the person creating the page, if they're creating it for themselves, they can add their photo, or their caregiver can add a family photo, and then they can name their site. And this site is named Courtney's Cancer Journey. And this is where Courtney, or the person creating the site, shares why they created their Caring Bridge page. This page really doesn't change, because you want anybody coming to your Caring Bridge page to understand why you originally created it. Next slide, please. So just below your homepage, this is where you communicate back and forth with your visitors. So you can each share messages, emojis, photos, and videos. You can share as much as you want. You can post every day, once a week, whatever your cadence comfortableness is. Or your visitors can post as often as they like to. Oftentimes, visitors who post a lot, kind of run out sometimes of things to say, so they'll just use an emoji to let the family know that they're thinking about them. Next slide, please. This is like one of the hardest working pages on Caring Bridge. This is what we call the Ways to Help page. And we have partnerships with GoFundMe, so you can start a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for medical expenses right from your Caring Bridge page. We have a relationship with Ship, so you can ask visitors to order groceries to be delivered or other products that they carry. Meal Train, you can coordinate homemade meals being delivered to the home. It just takes the guesswork out of what do people like? Do they have any food allergies? Where do I put the food? In the blue cooler by the front door. You can also add a healthcare facility if you'd like, and you can add support links to different cancer community support groups, pediatric support groups, prayer groups, whatever you choose. Next slide. And then a few ways partners share Caring Bridge. Actually, there's hundreds of hospitals across the nation that share Caring Bridge every day. They share our free brochures. We have over like 50,000 brochures ordered a year. They come in packs of 50. We also have sticky notes that can be put on paperwork. Oftentimes, social workers tell me they'll just ask the family for, their phone, and they'll just help them pull up Caring Bridge right from their mobile device. You can add us to patient paperwork or collateral. Brochures can be ordered either from me at skerber@caringbridge.org or directly from the partnerships section of our website. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thanks for all of what you shared. And thank you for what you do. I actually had a Caring Bridge page myself many, many years ago. So I love Caring Bridge, and it has a very special place in my heart. So thanks for sharing it today.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am Dee Fritch. I am the founder and president of Hearts Connected, and I always love these webinars. It makes me so excited to be able to present these to y'all. And I wanted to, in case you don't know about Hearts Connected, I wanted just a really quick little pivot here to tell you that we are here for organizations. We're here direct to parents, direct to the consumer, direct for our families. You can refer to us. Pediatricians and other organizations can refer to us. And if you're not following our pages on LinkedIn and on social, please do. We are building lots and lots of different programs in lots of different spaces throughout the United States, and really trying to meet that need and that behavioral health gap that is out there. So thank you for your support, and thank you for any referrals that you can send to us. And then before I turn it over to Carissa, I just wanted to kind of mention, it's a little bit of the elephant in the room with Child Life Specialist right now, but if you have seen any of my posts on LinkedIn, I've been pretty vocal in the last month. And I just wanted to touch on that for just a minute, because I am not a child life specialist. I'm a pediatric nurse of almost 35 years. And I obviously have a huge passion for Child Life, or I would not have a self-funded business, for Child Life specialists. And, while I am in this to impact the lives of children and families and to eventually make money, I am also here to support the industry. And I do anything I can in a business, a professional manner. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there that I'm here, I'm behind the scenes, I'm supporting. I will do anything that is within my power to do, that I can afford to do, to help you. And Carissa and the rest of the team are really working on some things behind the scenes to maybe try to make a difference in the world of child life. So if you have any ideas how a business can help you, I can't do everything, but if you have any ideas, I would love to hear. So you can put it in chat today. You can email us at I'm Dee at Hearts Connected. You can email Carissa. You can message me on LinkedIn, however you want to get the message to me. I would love nothing more than to hear feedback from you on how either my voice or my company can continue to support the industry. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to officially introduce Carissa. I don't think we introduced her. She is my operations manager, and she is going to introduce the wonderful guest that we have.
Thank you, Dee Dee. And while I do the introduction for all of our guests, you're welcome to put in our chat box some responses to Dee Dee's question. I want to make sure to formally introduce our entire panelist group because they all have many different accomplishments. So I'll be reading off their bios to all of you today. I am thankful to present, we have Laura Sufka here. She's a CCLS and founder of Children's Coping Connection. Laura's extensive experience in the field spans over 22 years, including inpatient and outpatient work at children's hospitals and clinics of Minnesota. Her dedication to the field of child life led to co-founding the Minnesota Child Life Coalition, teaching as an adjunct professor at the University of Minnesota's Institute of Child Development, and also authoring for Play in Hospitals, Real Life Perspectives, as well as speaking internationally. In Laura's spare time, she can be found baking delicious treats, exploring the great outdoors, and creating memories with her supportive husband and 3 adventurous kids who are 15, 13, and 10. I'm also grateful to present, we have Andrea McGinnis, who started her career as a CCLS in 2009 in the emergency department at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and remained there until 2021. During her 12-year career at the hospital, she also worked on an inpatient surgical trauma unit for 6 years and an outpatient clinic setting for 5 years. During her time working in outpatient, she served as the team's clinical expert and was instrumental in implementing child life services throughout a dozen outpatient clinics. In the fall of 2021, Andrea left the hospital setting to utilize her expertise in the school setting as a social emotional learning specialist. In this role, she teaches social emotional skills as whole class lessons in small groups and in one-on-one settings at 2 different elementary schools. In 2023, she also started her own private practice called SEL in a Nutshell to provide social emotional learning and child life services to children in the community. In addition to her work, Andrea is married and has 2 sons, an 8 and 5-year-old. I'm also grateful to present Lauren Stevens. She has been a CCLS for 14 years at Children's Hospital of Colorado. She has worked in a variety of settings from radiology and outpatient clinics to inpatient and the emergency department. Lauren has helped build 2 child life programs from the ground up at different satellite locations. She serves as a program coordinator for the Child Life Department, a primary facility dog handler, and currently works in the surgery center at Children's Hospital of Colorado. Lauren is married with 2 children, an 8-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. And lastly, I'm grateful to present, we have Andie Sherman. She is a CCLS at the Hematology Oncology Unit at Rady Children's Hospital, where she has worked for the past 15 years. She considers it an honor to serve these patients and families and to support them through life's most difficult time. During her career, Andie has served as the Child Life lead. She's overseen the Child Life Internship Program, led the hospital-wide professional practice council, presented at various conferences on supporting patients and siblings at the end of life, and facilitated several support groups for patients, siblings, and bereaved families. Andie lives in San Diego with her husband and 2 daughters who are 13 and 14 years old. And while she loves her career as a CCLS, being a mother is her true joy. In her free time, she loves spending time with her friends and family, taking care of her abundant house plants, as you can see in her background, exploring new coffee shops, and loving her Labradoodle pup, Finley. Um, it's honestly just so humbling for me to read all of what these women have accomplished on top of the full-time beautiful job of being moms to not only one kid but multiple children as well. Like just reading these these bios is just so humbling and so inspiring to me. And so I'm just so excited for myself, but also for our full audience to learn from you guys of how you were able to accomplish all that you have, but also maintain having a family, maintain your own personal goals amidst your career goals, and navigating the difficulties of all of that. So we have a lot of questions that were submitted for our panelists. We had over 40 questions submitted. We obviously don't have time for 40 questions today. I did consolidate as much that I could of the questions and blended some questions that were submitted, but there will be some that are missed. Our panelists have kindly offered to give their contact information to me to hand out to all of you here today if your question was not answered. And we may or may not have time for a live Q&A dependent on how many questions we get through today. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. All right, so our first question is, how did your work change once you had children of your own? Did you feel your capacity for managing emotional stress and trauma at work changing after having children? Go ahead, Lauren.
Absolutely. It's hard to describe the change. Once you have a child of your own, you are able to actually envision your child in the same situation as every patient you meet. So all of a sudden, I was able to put myself in the parent's shoes and and feel as if I, were them and it was my child. And so I feel like I am now able to connect with and support parents on a deeper level than I previously did. And then having kids also for me personally, it changed the trajectory of my career. So initially, I think as a new grad, I very much wanted to, I aspired to work in HEMONC or the ICU, but I discovered for myself that once having children that I couldn't handle that work environment, and the emotional toll that it would take on me. And so instead I chose kind of a different route, and I chose to work in areas where the emotional toll wasn't as high. So outpatient settings initially, urgent care and ED settings where it's not so in depth and taking that kind of the work home with me, or the feelings home with me. And then just kind of working my way up the clinical ladder in other ways. And so kind of finding my own goals to reach instead, like becoming a facility dog handler, taking students, and then eventually becoming a program coordinator.
Thank you, Lauren. And Andie, I see your hand raised as well.
Yeah, I guess I would agree as well. I think for me, the big change was just that I felt just everything on a deeper level. I think sitting in those conferences where families were getting the news that their child had cancer, and just kind of like you had said, I definitely then sat in those conferences thinking, what would I be feeling like if I was getting the same news? So I think it's hard to describe until you've had children of your own, but the love that you feel for them is so deep and just so different than any other relationship. And so I think that you just feel what these parents are going through on a deeper level. And yeah, it did rock me a little bit. And at the same time, I think it also allowed me to connect even deeper with them and just support them in new ways.
Thanks, Andie. And Laura?
Totally 100% agree with all of that. And then there's just like this logistical side, which is kind of funny, honestly, the idea of like sticker charts and like all the routines or all the things that the books tell us about parenting, and then you become a parent. And I just kind of like didn't throw it all out, but it was just really like it was so nice to be at a different level of like, yeah, that's actually not going to work. We're not going to do sticker charts for that. And so there was just this like great connection of like the reality really of what was going on in my own home, and then to take it to the next level of this family of like, so this is, thinking in my head like this is the strategy I want to use, but realistically like they're in clinic 3 days a week, so actually that's not going to work. And it actually stretched me, and I think I became a better child life specialist when it came to some of those like logistics and schedules and routines that I so wanted to implement into these family and these patients' lives. And I was working bone marrow transplant and hematology oncology at the time. And so there was so much medicine taking, so much routine, so many things that had to be done. And so I was just so grateful that I had just a little bit of a different perspective. But yeah, I 100% agree with like Lauren and Andie too, just of those other logisticals. So
Thanks, Laura.
yeah.
Our next question is, do you experience health anxiety or fear that what you see in the hospital will happen to your own children? How do you separate everything and not feel like the worst will happen to your own child? I think I saw Andrea's hand get raised first.
I definitely have some anxiety and fear about it. And I was on, as you said in my bio, I was on a trauma unit for 6 years. So swimming pools, lawnmowers, trampolines, all of those things, I'm a little bit more hyper vigilant around. But I kind of just tried to take that like anxiety or fear and look at it as more gratitude, that kind of I have the knowledge, like my kids know that they will not go on a bicycle or get in a car without a seatbelt, or a bicycle without their helmet. Like that's just not even a question. I don't care if every other kid in the neighborhood doesn't have their helmet on. So I kind of look at it as gratitude as well when something does happen to my child, to kind of have that knowledge of this is so tiny compared to what can be happening. So I actually feel like in some ways that anxiety can reduce my anxiety when something real does happen to my child, that I'm like, you know what, this is croup. We go to the hospital, we get steroids, we get nebulizer, we go home. Like this isn't a PICU overnight stay. We're not getting intubated. And I think sometimes that can throw my husband off a little bit when I'm like, this isn't like that big of a thing. We can kind of get through this. So like I kind of like view the anxiety and fear as like just more like knowledge. And that can actually help reduce my anxiety, because I'm just grateful that this is all we're dealing with.
I never thought of it that way. That's actually a really beautiful perspective and feels very real for me too. I love that. Thank you. Laura, I think I saw your hand get raised next.
Yeah, I really agree with Andrea, actually, just kind of like it really put this great advocacy into me where I just feel like I can, although I am a parent first and always, and I actually really make sure I state that when I am, my third child has 9 lives. So we have been in a burn unit and a trauma unit. And so we have done all of those things. But there's that great perspective of like, no, I actually know exactly what's about to happen. So that is great. But for me personally, actually, it wasn't child life that increased my health anxiety. No, it wasn't being a parent. It was actually just being a child life specialist. Where all of a sudden every headache I had as like a young adult or like new professional, I was like, yep, I must have a brain tumor. And, so it was just that I think that reality of like all the new information and what could happen to people, all of a sudden I felt was happening to me when I started child life. So I do think that's a really important statement, because I think it's important as you are new in child life that you distinguish that right away. Like, are those your own fears? Is that your professional fear? And kind of understand that and navigate that maybe personally a little bit first. I think it's also it's your professional responsibility to understand your own fears and anxieties as you enter a profession anyway. So.
Definitely. Thanks, Laura. And then I think it was Andie next.
Yeah, I would say I absolutely struggle with this. I think I've self-diagnosed my girls with cancer 100 times. And My pediatricians have been very kind and gentle when I come in with a lot of concern or, but I think for me, it's this dialogue of, and kind of this balance that, you know, I see this every day. And so it feels like it's very common. And so having that grace for myself to be like, okay, there's a reason that I'm worrying about these things more than other people would, but also having that dialogue of like, this is rare and what I see every day is rare. And so it doesn't mean that, you know, every bruise or, you know, every bump is going to be cancer for my girls. So I think it is a balance and just, yeah, being kind to myself in it, but also just reminding myself that, again, this is rare what I see.
Thank you. And Lauren?
I think I echo a lot of what everyone else has said. But working in healthcare, we often are those parents that are the worst at taking their kids in to the doctor and ER. So, I think we just have a different perspective. So when it's kind of like Andrea was saying, croup, colds, flu, fevers, injuries, no big deal, whatever, it's fine, you'll be fine, until we really actually are like, oh no, I guess I do need to take you in. But on the other hand, when you do find a mystery lump or bump on your child, your mind does go to the absolute worst, cancer, amputation, life-changing diagnoses. And so I just have to remind myself, kind of like what Andie was saying, where this is rare. We see the sickest of the sick children in an entire 7-state region. So I just have to remind myself that this is not the norm, what I see on a daily basis. But also, like Andrea, I'm very much the safety cautious parent. I'm a car seat freak. My poor 9-year-old is still in a backless booster, and he is, quite embarrassed, but he's not tall enough. It doesn't fit. And you're going to be in the back seat forever. And same with the helmets. There's no question there will be a helmet or you're not riding. So, those things.
Yeah. What I'm hearing a lot of is like secondary trauma, that the worst case scenario becomes normal for us. And so of course we're going to have a trauma response and then think that the worst case scenario is happening to our child. So I think you all speak to the complexity of that, and then the normalcy of what we all experience just in trauma, with our jobs. And we're constantly having to check ourselves of what is work life and what is actual typical normal life, and how do those things blend together but also stay separate. So how do you deal with secondary trauma, seeing your own child and all the patients that you provide support to? It's a hard question. Or maybe you haven't figured out how to deal with it yet, which is totally normal too. Go ahead, Andie.
Yeah, I think this is an art to learn. I think it is hard. I think kind of we talked about this before, but just where you do, especially when I feel like my patients are the same age as my girls, I definitely find myself thinking, how would they be responding to this, or what would their reaction be to this procedure? Or even for myself, I'm like, would I be the parent that's getting the code gray because I'd be, I don't know, stressed out. So again, I think a lot of it is just having, the ability to remind yourself that this is your patient's experience. And while you're a witness to that and a part of their story, it still is their story, and trying to really be mindful of having that separation. And yet at the same time, I think that can be hard because I feel like you can kind of in time kind of just grow kind of hard and be jaded by it. And I feel like there's a fine line of that balance of not taking all of it so personal, but also still being empathetic and compassionate so that you're not ineffective in that way.
Mm-hmm. And Laura?
Yeah, I just want to really echo what Andie said, but honestly, I think this is more just like a professional question, in the sense of this is something anybody has to do in any profession, specifically working with kids and families. There is a sense of like, you have to figure out what works best for you. And if that's therapy or counseling or, you know, whatever that is. I don't believe in a work-life balance. I just don't think that actually works. I believe in a pendulum, that I'm doing really well sometimes and I'm not doing so well other times. And so, but also that pendulum gives me the opportunity to kind of assess myself. And Lauren mentioned earlier, like kind of recognizing what unit worked for her when she became a parent. And I think that's really, really valuable work that she did with her own self, to really reflect on like, this is not working actually for me to show up in these trauma units day after day after day. And that's okay. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what all professionals should do. So I really look at it as more as like a professional answer and not just a child life answer. So
Thank you, Laura. Very true as well. On hard days, how do you find support at home while trying to balance HIPAA, mental health of your family members, as well as your own needs? Go ahead, Laura. Or maybe it was an old raised hand. Go ahead.
that's okay. I'll answer
Andrea.
it. I have one answer. It's really what I just said. It's really about like figuring out what is best for me at the end of the day. I am really truly the only person that's taking care of me. And so I have to do a lot of self-reflection. And at the first 5 years of my career, I didn't do a good job at this. Probably the first 10 years, maybe even possibly the first 15 years. I'm at a better state now where I'm at. And I'm just really figuring out that what works for me. And if you're looking for like a little really tangible thing, for me is nature. So if I feel like I'm struggling, I just need to step outside, quite honestly, and get a little fresh air. Even if it's 30 below in Minnesota, it just kind of wakes me up and allows me to get a little grounded. So.
And Andrea?
For me, I think it's really kind of knowing who are the people in my life that I can kind of connect with on this sort of thing. My husband, he's wonderful, he's supportive, but his work and my work are very different. So he is just not the person that is going to be able to understand when I'm trying to kind of explain the hecticness of the day and the stress that I felt and all of those things. He can help me and support me in different ways, but kind of having those debriefing, venting conversations, he's not the person. I now don't work in the hospital setting. I still work with some child life specialists, but not as many, but I'll still do like what I call like my commute chats. So I'll call my girlfriends on my way to work, my like CLS girlfriends, and just like be able to talk to them. And it's kind of like when you have those connections with people who do this work and know this work, you don't have to explain as much. Those people don't feel bad for you when you're explaining the stressfulness. You're not looking for that sympathy from them that like, oh my gosh, you did have to do that, or things like that. So I think kind of knowing who is in your network is really helpful. And then honestly, therapy is very helpful. I feel like we're like in these like helping fields and everything, but sometimes we don't do for ourselves what we suggest to others. And that was something that was helpful for me, just to be able to talk to someone like truly outside of my bubble in my world.
Definitely. Thank you, Andrea. And for Andie?
Yeah, I think for me, I do share with my girls, not specifics of patients giving their names and things like that, but I do share stories with them. And I think for me, it's always been important that I kind of expose my girls to hard things so that they can kind of grow a heart of compassion and have just an awareness. And I think also for them, it gives them context. I think, it is hard when we're dealing with really hard things at work and then you walk, into your home and, there's times where I've come in and I've been tearful. And I think without any context as to what's going on with mom, why is she upset? I think that it kind of helps them understand. And one thing that I really appreciate and story that really comes to my mind with this is my oldest is super just empathetic and just reads me like a book, knows when I need a hug without even saying a word. And when she was little and she'd be upset, you know, my thing, I would always hold her and rock her until she was calm. And even as a teen now, when she's really upset, you know, she's not in my lap anymore, but you know, she's next to me, and the same thing, like we rock and I just hug and hold her until she's calm. And I remember coming home one day, and it was a patient I had worked with for 8 years and was so close to, and it was so hard. And I remember walking in the door and sitting at the bottom of our stairs, and my daughter just came at the step behind me without me even saying anything, and just wrapped her arms around me and immediately and just innately starts rocking me as well. And so I think you know, that means a lot to me. And when I do experience really hard things at work, it's like the first thing I want to do is just like go home and be so grateful that I get to come home and hug my girls and that they're here and they're healthy. So I think it is, yeah, that for me is important. I agree with the therapy as well, and having your people that you know you can go to for support. I'm also a big journaler, and so that is helpful for me to just kind of process what I'm feeling, or you know, if I'm thinking about certain situations at work a lot and I'm like, okay, I don't want to be stuck in this, but why is that triggering to me, or why is that coming up? So yeah, I'm a big fan of journaling.
Love those. Thanks, Andie. And Lauren?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone else has said. I think you have your people that work in the field that you can really vent to and really kind of turn to in times of need. And then I think just having a super supportive partner in life as well. So my husband, he really understands what I do for a living and the emotional toll that comes with it. And there are times where I'm not ready to come home. I'm very lucky that I have a very short commute now, which is nice, but previously, when I had a longer commute, I had more time to process. I had time to cry before I got home. And so there are times where I just kind of shoot my husband a text and give him the heads up that, hey, it's been a really hard time, really rough day. I'm going to go driving around for a little bit longer, or I'm going to pick up the dogs and I'm going to go for a walk. And that's my time. My me time is kind of like, Laura was saying, nature. And so I just want to be outside. I listen to my music. I process the day alone. I cry if I need to. And then when I come home, I'm ready to be in mom mode, and I hug my kids extra tight, because being a child life specialist puts things into perspective so much that you have such a great appreciation for the health of your kids. So.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of what I heard was not even so much seeking out support from others, like the question was asking, but it was taking the time to pause, to make time for yourself, to process on your own, whether it's walking, nature, journaling, like a long drive. From what I'm hearing, it's lots of time to just pause, to be able to take that time for like yourself, and then you're able to move into the home space and do your mom role again more effectively and with more compassion again too. So I think that pause and that time for yourself is so important, is what I'm hearing too. Did you take extended time off beyond a typical maternity leave when you first became a parent? And when did you feel ready to return? Part of this question was from a first-time parent who said that she feels very nervous about going back to work and being emotionally exhausted. And what tips do you have for this? Big question. This was like 3 questions combined into one. You get a lot of new moms that had questions about this. Go ahead, Lauren.
Oh gosh. You're never ready. I don't think anyone is ever ready to return to work after having a child. For me, I was really lucky. Just the way some things panned out with my career, I was able to take almost have a 6-month maternity leave with my first. I did my 3 months, and then I came back as PRN before coming back after 6 months to a full-time position. I was really lucky that I work for a hospital and a department that supports breastfeeding, and lactation rooms are all over the hospital. But for me, it was really, it's so exhausting, those those first few months, once you're juggling being a new mom, a new parent, and then adding in the work at, coming to a hospital every day and dealing with more kids who might be crying and screaming and yelling, and sometimes you just want a break from kids. But I think it's huge to make sure that your child life team is aware of legal rights, right, for lactation breaks, and to advocate for yourself and to take those breaks. That is your right. And so remember to do those things. And if you need those breaks to look at pictures of your baby or FaceTime your baby at home, do it. That's what you need. But if you work in a high acuity area and you are concerned with juggling the breaks you need or the emotional toll that those units bring, have those conversations with your supervisor while you're on maternity leave. Do it sooner than later. Be transparent. It's hard to admit that you need that extra support, but the sooner you can have those conversations, I feel like the better chance that you can be supported and maybe other opportunities are available to you. But I will say, when the kids got a little bit older, there were times that coming to work felt like a breath of fresh air. It was a break from the exhaustion of parenthood, and I got to actually talk to other adults. So hang in there. It's hard, but also great.
Great insight, Lauren. Thank you. And for Andrea, I saw your hand
I
up.
was gonna say very similarly, Lauren, I don't think anyone's ever really ready. I don't think that's a thing in child life or not in child life. And I think similarly to what Lauren said for another question is, so I took my 12 weeks, and then at that time when I had my first son, I was on the inpatient surgical trauma unit, and that unit was really shifting in its patient population at that time, and we were having much more long-term kids. So before I went out on maternity leave, or like at the start, it was like a 10-day stay was like a long-term kid, and then it was becoming like months-long kids. And I feel like for me, as the child life specialist on a unit with much more long-term kids, you feel more like caregiver type of a energy for them. So for me, I knew that wasn't going to mix with kind of being that emotional exhaustion of going home and then being able to take care of my baby in the way that I wanted to. So that was why I kind of really looked to switch to an outpatient setting. Like I could still do child life, but I was seeing kids and they were going home, and I was going to have a fresh batch of kids the very next day. So I really think you can do both, but you have to kind of be honest with yourself too. And for some people, they can balance being in an ICU and onco unit. It doesn't mean that you have to do that, but for me personally, I knew that I just couldn't do that.
Yeah, that's very self-aware of you. I think it takes a lot of time of self-reflection to realize those things. I think that's super important. And Laura, you had something to add?
Yeah, I just want to be really transparent that when, and I'm saying this because this person who is coming back, is trying to a little bit predict the future, right? So we don't really know how we're going to respond. Prior to me having children, we had infertility issues for 5 years. And the reason I say that is because prior to having kids, my husband and me had already had the discussion of what it was going to look like once we had kids.
Mhm.
I absolutely understand that that's not an option for everyone. But if there is a chance right now, early in your career and early into parenthood, where you're able to have that discussion with your spouse about what does this really look like for us? So I wasn't actually working full time because I had so many infertility appointments that I couldn't, because I had to work. So I worked 6.0 or 7, no, yeah, 0.7, sorry, 0.7. And then for an entire year before I even had a child, because I had clinic appointments that I had to go to. And honestly, it was wonderful once we had the child, because then I already had a taste of what could I handle. I don't think I already knew I couldn't handle going back full time. I already knew that was not going to work for me, because it was hard enough to do it when I didn't have a child yet and we had infertility and appointments. So and I'm only saying that because now I'm like, 23 years in, and I'm like, oh, what I would have said to myself back then, like, it's okay. You didn't have to work full time. You were doing other things. And so having that conversation with your partner or your spouse during this really like infancy stage is a really good idea, because it helps you to practice that next conversation you're going to have with your boss and tell them maybe you can't work in that trauma unit anymore, or maybe full-time is not what you actually thought you wanted to do. And so all that's just really good practice.
Thank you so much for sharing that part of like your story, Laura. And I think it's such a unique perspective. And I think a really important reminder to, just like we prep kids for procedures, we kind of have to prep ourselves too of, what is it going to look like for us as a parent, and what coping techniques need to be put in place to help us to succeed. With many of you having tweens and young teens, how did you handle kids that had aged out of daycare? What did that look like? Go ahead, Andie.
Yeah, I think I am super fortunate that I have family that lives down the street, and I know that's not everybody's situation, but that was huge in helping to get the girls to and from school or sports and all the things. And also just with my husband's work, he is a firefighter, so he has, works 24 and then he's home for 24. But I think the other key thing for me was finding and connecting with moms at school and friends. And paying them back in fun wine nights or cookies, because I'm the mom that only has one day off a week that I can actually take their kids to school. So I think just really trying to make those connections, because it is hard when, you're not able to, get them to and from school, and they can't be in daycare or after school care. What do you do for those hours? So for me, I was lucky to have just my family and other moms that were so willing to help me out. But I know that's not everybody's situation, but that's how it worked for us.
Thank you. And Laura?
Yeah, similar to Andie. My husband's a teacher, but actually, so after we had children, then I switched, not because I didn't want to work with bone marrow transplant patients and trauma, but I wanted to do what was best for my family. And what was best for my family was me switching to emergency room work. And so I would work night and weekends. And sometimes me and my spouse were passing in the wind, but as he came home and I left. But honestly, it was what we could do to put our family first, and it worked for us. And it is not ideal for everyone, but so I worked hematology, oncology, BMT with kids, and then, or without kids, and then one kid. Sorry, there's a little gap there where we did have a child in daycare for just a little bit of a stint, and then emergency room, and then I would work SIB shops on the weekends, and then grief support. And so I made my profession work with my family life, not my family life work with my profession. So, and that's just what worked for us. And then my husband being a teacher, I was able to add a lot more hours in June, July, and August when he was home. So that was kind of my like workhorse months. So
Yeah, and that's so important to remember, is that we don't want to plan our family around our work. Our work needs to be planned around our family. And I think in a caring profession where we want to care for our patients, and we deeply do care about who they are and their the care that we give them, it's hard to remind ourselves that our kids still come first, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that we don't care about our patients or the kids that we love at work. Our kids come first no matter what, and to kind of always think about that too. Do you ever feel like not playing with your child after coming home from work? How do you balance having enough to give your patients while still having enough in your cup at the end of the day for your own kids? Go ahead, Lauren. And super eager hand raise.
It's interesting. I know everyone has different opinions, but I didn't feel like that. But again, I think it depends on the units you work on. My units were primarily doing prep and support. So I wasn't doing a lot of play. It's just prep support, right? And so for me, playing with my own children is just, it's different, right? It's my downtime. It's my time to focus on them, talk about their day. And that kind of fills my cup. But absolutely, when there were days when I was drained and I was tired and I just didn't have it in me. I just have to realize that I need my self-care walk first before coming into mom mode. Or other times it's kind of like, okay, I want to be present for my kids. I'm going to come home, I'm going to be present. And you know what? Mom's not cooking tonight. I just have to prioritize being present for my family, and dinner is not it. So we're doing takeout.
I love that. Thanks, Lauren. And Andie?
Yeah, I would say 100%. I have been there where I'm like, I really want to just walk in the door, grab a glass of wine, go hide in my room and not interact with a single soul. Definitely been guilty of that. But, I can also think of times where I've had parents at work be like, oh, you must be such a fun mom and have all the patience in the world. And I'm like, actually, I have my moments, but so I think for me, I do have a longer commute, and so that's something that I've really tried to take advantage of and do differently is on that drive home, instead of being frustrated that I'm stuck in so much traffic, listen to a book on tape or listen to music that I like, or talk to a friend and just kind of recenter myself and in that commute, do something that's good for me so that I can walk in the door and be present. I remember like a time when I had gotten home and we were playing a game and as we're playing, I'm like scrolling on my phone, doing something mindless is what I felt like I needed. But I remember my daughter being like, Mom, you're always on your phone, and that really stuck with me because, I think we do want to be, when I'm home, I want to be present and I want to, I want that time to be good. I feel like I spend so much time away from home that when I'm here, it's important to me that I'm having quality time with my girls. So I think that's something that really hit me and I really try to do different. That's when I really started thinking, okay, I got to take that drive and make that my time so that I can come home and be present. But it's hard. There's definitely days where, yeah, the wine sounds better.
And Andrea?
I can definitely relate. That was almost exactly what I was gonna say of like other parents being like, oh, you're so okay with doing Play-Doh or this and that. I'm like, yeah, not always though. And honestly, in those moments, sometimes I'd like look at it like, but Andrea, this is your job and you're doing what is best for like the patient and the family that's in front of you right now. And are you always that parent every single day at home? But like, I kind of viewed my role, especially when I was outpatient, of also like helping out the parent and kind of like stepping in for the parent to kind of be that ultimate fun parent who can engage with their child so that the parent who's at the appointment can pay attention to the doctor, can see what's happening during the study, all of those sort of things. I don't know if I ever like perfectly balanced it or I do perfectly balance it. I definitely have had those moments of guilt and less about like wanting to not play with my kids when I get home, but more about when I'm watching my patients have like certain behaviors that I see in my kids at home, of like being able to have a beautiful discussion with like the parents or the nurses to explain why this behavior is happening and how normal it is and all of these things. But then when I go home, I like don't always have like give my own family that same grace. So I feel like I sometimes would struggle more with that. But I feel like playing with my kids and giving them big hugs and yeah, ordering takeout and just being able to focus on having fun is also what like helps me through the hard days at work. So I think that is like a very common fear that you're not going to want to play with your own kids because you play for a living. But I, never really had that experience.
Thanks for sharing. How has becoming a parent positively impacted you as a child life specialist? And someone actually submitted a question this morning that was kind of similar of what type of skills have you gained since becoming a parent? Go ahead, Lauren. Or sorry, go ahead. I think it was Andrea.
I think I think people have kind of touched on this earlier, but just a more realistic approach, I think, especially when it comes to preparing for procedures. And I think it was Laura who was talking about sticker charts. I think all of the things I think, my first few years in child life, I kind of think back of some of the suggestions I would give parents and I kind of cringe thinking about some of them like, you can do this and this and this. So I think it just gave me a more realistic way to be able to present information, thinking about like, no, not it also helped me with like prepping kids for procedures. Like, no, that parent might be right. Like this kid might not benefit from having all of the information ahead of time, and being able to talk about it afterwards might be better for that. I have one of those kids. He had his appendix out last year. He did not get a full-blown A to Z surgery prep prior to it, because I know him and I know that that wouldn't help him. So I think it helped me to just really listen to like the parents a little bit more, and not just assume that every parent wants to just not tell their kids anything, and really be able to like individualize my approach to that specific family. And then yeah, I think people also touched on this a little bit, but just I feel like giving like different attention to the parents and being able to provide them with information. Prior to being a parent, I feel like if I was going to do a surgery prep, I would go in after the surgeon spoke to the family. And after becoming a parent, I was more inclined to want to be a part of that appointment visit with the surgeon in the room, so that I could advocate for the parents as well, to say, like, oh, well, you're probably wondering about what she's going to look like afterwards, or what would be some good activities, things that doctors kind of forget to do, that are really geared towards the parent. That information, I think that it really helps me think about the whole family in a different way.
I love that. Thank you. And Lauren?
Oh gosh, I think we've all touched on this, but the deeper connection with the parents, or the deeper kind of empathy that you have with parents, I think has been a positive impact on me as a specialist. But also, I a work-life balance has made me a better child life specialist. It's forced me. Having kids has forced me to have a better work-life balance. We all know we are not in this field for our salary. Everyone can agree on that, right? We do this work because we love it and it's our passion. But prior to having kids, I would stay late to support those patients. I would stay late for a procedure that I knew was starting later than my shift, or I would alter my shifts to accommodate patients and families and those things that were scheduled. And now I have learned that I rely on my teammates to take those referrals, or I have to say no. And as much as all child life specialists hate saying no, I have learned that I have to have that work-life balance. I have to do what I need to do to be able to continue working in this field, and lasting in this field without burning out. Being a parent, you have to have work-life balance, and I work the hours that I am paid for and scheduled for now.
I love that. And I think that's such a like a unique reminder, in the sense that I think so many people that are maybe not parents yet, or they're new parents, worry that being a parent is going to affect the sustainability of being a CCLS, when in reality you've learned that it's actually become more sustainable becoming a parent, because you've gained skills on setting boundaries and knowing what you need, because you've been forced to have to do that to make it work. And so it actually has helped you to be able to sustain being a CCLS for maybe longer than you would have if you didn't have kids. So I think it's like a very cool perspective. Laura?
Yeah, absolutely. 100% what everyone has said. But two things I want to point out for me personally, is just that gentle reminder once I became a parent that I may be an expert in the work that I'm doing within the hospital setting or as a child life specialist, but I am not an expert on their child. They are the only experts on their child. And I think that once I became a parent, I really truly stood what that meant, in a really deep level. Like, really truly understanding that these children and these families spend such a small amount in the hospital or in the clinic setting, and the majority of their life or their chronic illness is actually in their home or in their community setting. And so just that reminder was so good for me. And then honestly, if I could be really truthful, at least in my training as a child life specialist many years ago, I think it's the number one thing we don't get enough schooling in is how to work with parents, honestly. I think it's a really missing key topic that a lot of child life specialists don't have a knowledge base on. And I wish I did. When I was a young child life specialist, I wish I really would have understood the impact of not the whole family, but the parent and caregiver impact to that child's life. And I don't think I got enough training on it. Maybe others did. I definitely seek out more of that kind of training once I became a parent, because I was like, whoa, this is a missing topic here. And have, like Lauren said, and I think everyone else said too, is just that compassion for parents. Like literally they're just doing their very best every day.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, everybody. In your opinion, is it appropriate to talk about your own children with your patients and families? I think I saw Laura's hand get raised, or it was old, I forget, but Laura or Andrea.
I personally don't. But what I do is I share my own experience in the sense of saying, a child once told me, or a parent once told me, or in the sense of when my own son ended up in the burn unit for 4 days. I had still have not worked with a lot of burn families, honestly. And so when I come across that in the emergency room, or when I did, I would give just a general perspective of what I know as a child life specialist, but also as a parent. And you don't have to share that it's your child or your family. It's really just the knowledge base that you're gaining and the expertise that you're gaining to then, you just happen to be a child life specialist who happens to also work with families who are in a burn unit or something like that. So that's my own thing.
Thank you. And Andrea?
I probably have a little bit of a different perspective. Yeah, I do. I go into like specific details about my kids? No, not really. But to me, being a mom and motherhood is a part of who I am. And I don't really know where it was along my training where I felt like it was told to me that I shouldn't allow that part of me to be known to like the people that I work with, but it was ingrained in there somewhere. And I don't know if I saw some chatter in the chat box about like, prior to having kids, I feel like all child life specialists would hate it when a parent would say, well, do you have your own kids? And it was like, well, no, I don't, but I know a lot of things about children and being a child life specialist. So I don't know if that's kind of what's ingrained, but for me, I do. I mentioned that I'm a mom. I feel like it helps me to be able to connect with families, especially when, that mom is looking at me like, oh, wow, you have a lot of patience and you're playing and all of those things, just to be able to help them to feel like more normalized about themselves too, like not always perfect. Like I'm a mom too, or when parents are kind of apologizing for their kids' behaviors, just throwing out simple, like, I got 2 of my own. It's, no big deal. Like just calm yourself down. So for myself, I do, but everyone does their own thing and you'll kind of figure out what works for you. You'll along the time, you'll hear other colleagues, whether it's child life or medical or whoever, give bits of information that you're like, oh, I wouldn't have shared that. But so you kind of find your own groove with that sort of a thing.
Perfect, thank you. And we actually, Laura commented to just clarify that she does share that she is a mom and has children. She just doesn't share like their names or like their personal information or things like that as well. And Andie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't initiate that conversation with them, but I feel like a lot of families do end up asking, do you have kids? Or even patients will ask, do you have any kids? And so if they ask, then I will share with them at that point. And then I think I've also found for me on my unit, I think, these families are with us for so long and we're with them in, the highs and the lows. And it's, in a lot of ways, kind of an intimate relationship, if you will, not in a weird way, but, just that you get to know them so well. So I feel like sometimes them feeling like feel like they're connected to you a little bit, or you become a little bit, I don't know, it's just another way, I guess, that you connect with them. And so, yeah, I obviously am not sharing like tons of details about them, but just some of those common things like, yeah, I get that, or even I think sometimes they enjoy hearing, you know, positive things that are happening, especially when, you know, maybe their child's missing out on that and they just want to hear some normal things. Sometimes that will come up as well.
Great. And I'm actually going to address the question that was asked in the chat just because it's so pertinent to what we're talking about right now. And I think it was Andrea who touched on it, but we had someone ask, how did you respond to your patients' parents and families when they would ask you whether you had kids or not before you had kids? And when they would say comments like, how can you know how to work with kids if you haven't had kids yourself? Or how can I trust you? Like, how did you kind of navigate those conversations before you guys had kids? And did the way that you navigate those, would it have maybe changed like once you did have kids on how you would have had those conversations? Go ahead, Andie.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about this earlier, but I think maybe I would have done this better and tried to do some of this, but I think just again realizing that those parents really know that child best. And so I think being able to validate that to parents, like I know that like you are their best support, you know them the best, but just being able to more share on like, you know, in my experience working with kids in the hospital, these are the things that I've seen work, or these are some of the challenges that are common with this age, or so more speaking to my experience that I've seen in other kids that I've worked with. But I think it is challenging, and it is a hard feeling when you feel like they're looking at you like, who are you? But being a parent on the flip side, quite honestly, I probably would have those moments at times of being like, who are you to be telling me how to do this? Or I think that was kind of the question before, where yeah, there's probably things that like I like cringe at now thinking that I probably said, or you know, felt very like textbook, like I actually know exactly how we're going to solve this problem. So yeah, I think again, just validating, I think that's the biggest thing, is realizing that they really know their child best and we can learn a lot from them too. And I think it helps them feel empowered as well to be able to help when we're seeking kind of their advice as well.
And maybe even if we can't relate to being a parent ourselves, we can also share examples of like a parent that I had like supported, you know, said this, or one of my colleagues who's also like a mom and does what I do said this, and kind of be able to like rely on the evidence that we have from other experiences as well, I think can be helpful. All right. If your child has ever been hospitalized, how do you balance your role as a mom versus a CCLS? And along with this question, since I think there's two panelists here who can speak to this, we had someone ask, you know, what if your child does fall in that worst case scenario situation, whether it's a chronic illness or a burn or something else, and kind of how did you manage that? Go ahead, Lauren.
I think, you know, we're child life specialists, so that just is inherent in what we do, I think, as a parent, right? So taking my kids in for their regular checkups, immunizations, things like that, I was totally that mom, child life specialist mom that prepared them ahead of time, printed off prep books, came up with my coping plan, you know, totally advocated, brought my own buzzy, all of those things, right? But when it wasn't a planned trip and it was an emergency visit, I would prepare them as best as I could. On the way into the hospital, I'd be texting my coworkers, are you there? What's the wait? All of those things, right? I think we would all do that. But when I was actually in the emergency room or in the surgery center, those are the times where if my coworkers were there, I relied on them. I prepare my kids as much as I can, but in the moment of during a procedure or during that surgery, I need to be mom. I have to listen to the surgeon and listen to the consent form that I'm about to sign. I need to be just mom and the comfort person when my son had to get a very unpleasant procedure done in the ED. And so if my coworkers were there, I absolutely relied on them to do that formal prep in the moment, and then provide the procedural support during, and then use me as the comfort hold, you know, the mom, right? Just comforting and snuggling and loving him. But I also know that being a child life specialist, you're able to advocate for things that other parents don't know to advocate for, right? The comfort holds, the EMLA, the J-tip, all of those things. So there's definitely a separation and a balance, but we definitely use our skills for sure.
Definitely. And Laura?
Totally 100%. Like, we can't help but not use our skills. It would be silly not to, quite honestly. And so it just like use that as like your superpower, right? But I actually for me, what works best is I verbalize to the staff right away. Because I'm very fortunate, we live near a children's hospital, which happens to be a children's hospital I used to work at. And so I'm very clear, like, I'm a mom first. Yes, I know where every single thing is on this unit. I could go grab my own toys, blah, 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 but I'm not going to. So, but I also think that takes practice. And I say that because I think when my kids were younger, I felt like I had to be both and do both. Like, I had to be the child life specialist because I know all the answers here, and my husband's feeling anxious and I'm not feeling anxious. In the environment, I'm feeling anxious because I'm the mom and I'm watching my child go through this. And then again, my youngest has like 9 lives. So as we continued through, like, he's had a skull fracture. And so we've gone to an ambulance, and he was on a burn unit because he burned both his hands. And so I just got better at being really clear and honestly not offering as much knowledge. Like, I knew what was happening. I totally knew what was happening. I've worked in trauma. I've worked in a lot of different units. So I just got better at just being the mom, honestly. And I think what Lauren said was really valuable, like that work-life balance, which again, I don't agree in because I've never done it well, but the pendulum, but like, I just got better at it. You will get better, and it's all because of practice, and you'll figure out what works best for you, and you'll figure out how to support your child the very best in the medical setting. And part of that will be using your knowledge base as a child life specialist. And then the other part of it will be using your knowledge base as a parent, knowing your child the very best. And it will all work out and it will be okay.
Thank you, Laura. Have you found that your work environment is supportive of your work and family life needs? How have you been able to advocate or not advocate for flexibility in your role that is often required as a parent? What considerations did you make working part-time versus full-time, a Monday through Friday versus weekends? All of those decisions that go into play, what did that look like for you, and was your work supportive or not? And how did you navigate that? Go ahead, Laura. Or yeah, Laura. Oh, sorry, Lauren. Too many hands raised.
Sure. So I felt, I think a lot of it had to do with a little bit of luck, but my department, my hospital is very supportive of work-life balance, and you know, there's that the benefit of being salaried. And able to flex your time, right? To be able to leave early for an appointment or a school function, or come in late due to an appointment. I think as long as I kept communication clear and communicated ahead of time and didn't take advantage of those opportunities and worked as close to my 40 hours a week as I could, my requests were always approved. I think consistent communication with my leaders about what I needed, and you know, I think that was key. But when I had my daughter, I came back full time and realized it was very challenging, that transition. And then I got pregnant pretty quickly afterwards. And when I had my son, I realized I needed part-time. And when I was on my maternity leave, that's when I informed my director and my staff and said, if anything, any opportunities whatsoever come up for part-time, I would be in for that. And I think because I communicated that, they were able to accommodate that. And so, you know, a new position was available, and instead of putting it out as a 1.0, they put it out as 2F 0.5 FTE to support me, because I've been, you know, here in the department for a long time. I was supportive. I communicated those needs ahead of time. But, and I know this is one of the next questions when it came to costs of childcare. When I was part-time, my entire salary was going to childcare. And that's when I started looking at other opportunities, and kind of like Laura had said previously, I ended up actually picking up a part-time evening weekend position that opened up so that I didn't have to pay for childcare. So I was home with the kids during the day, and then I went to work in the evenings and weekends. I got those shift differentials, which helped to bump up my salary a little bit as well. But you kind of do what you got to do in those seasons, and that season was very difficult.
But you figured it out. And Andrea, go ahead.
Similar experiences to Lauren, so I won't re-go through that, but I think another kind of, I think when, especially when right now I work in schools, and my team and my manager is extremely supportive, very much like wants us to be able to be working moms. So I am salaried. There are times when I have to come to back to school nights or different things that I don't get paid for, but then I can go and leave and go for the hour-long Christmas concert, and it's no big deal. And I'm able to kind of balance both those things. But especially when I was at the hospital, I made sure that when I was there, I was fully there. I was working my butt off, and my CLS team and my medical team knew that I was there and I was working my butt off. So if I did get that phone call that I needed to go pick up my son from daycare because he was suddenly sick, and I had to not go to the procedure that I was planning to go to, they respected me enough to know that I was never given like a guilt feeling from them, because they knew that I did work hard when I was there, and that I was trying to set them up for as much success as possible. So this is the coping plan that would work. These are the things that you can utilize. You know, if I could be there for the first 5 minutes, just prep the kid and not be there for the coping, you know, so really being able to also show your team that when you are there at work, you are working, and you're fully committed to doing that. I think that goes a really long way for people to give you a lot more grace as a parent.
Definitely, you're building trust with your team, that they trust that when you're there, you are working, and when you're not there, it's because you can't be for a very important reason. Go ahead, Andie.
Yeah, I also reduced my hours after I became a mom. I just knew that 5 days a week was going to be really challenging on top of a commute as well. So I went down to 32. So I have Wednesdays off of work. And I'm really grateful that my work has been supportive of that. I think, you know, it's the little things that as a mom, you want to be a part of, like, you know, right now, like the high school drama, the driving, I don't get to hear that except for Wednesdays, the to and from work. And, you know, just that time I do really value, or even, you know, when they were younger, when it was, you know, being able to volunteer in the class, those things are important, and it goes so quick. So I think I would encourage anybody that's, you know, about to be in that phase or is in that season right now, that, you know, those opportunities are gone so quickly. So do really advocate and ask, and kind of like you were saying earlier too, just when you are at work, working really hard, so that you can take that other time. And I think another consideration that somebody else had spoke to earlier was just family always being first. And, you know, sometimes that means making hard decisions, even in your career, or opportunities that you really wish that you could do or want to do, but making those hard decisions of, you know, that doesn't really line up though well with how I want to be as a mom, or my family time being most important. So I think taking those considerations have to happen, and sometimes those are hard decisions, but totally worth it.
Love that. And it was already touched on briefly, but just in case there's like some more input on it, what keeps you working when childcare cost just as much? Wait, sorry, I said that wrong. What keeps you working when childcare costs just as much as what we are paid? I know Lauren, I think, had touched on it briefly, but for the rest of you as well, what kind of kept you motivated to continue doing what you're doing, or not like not move forward with it. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, just again, touching on what I had said previously, kind of, well, being a child life specialist, sometimes you don't have a lot of options of other positions or roles you can take. It's such a specialized field, right? And so, at least when I was a new parent, it was, I didn't have a backup option that I could think of, and I didn't want to leave the field. So it was, really working with my team and seeing how I could shift, if I could go part-time or evenings and weekends. But personally, I would not have been able to do this and keep my position, and be a parent without the support of my husband's salary. And that sucks to say. But we also had an investment property, a rental property as well, that helped, during that really, difficult time. But and we had to switch too from a daycare institution to hiring a stay-at-home mom in the neighborhood. I mean, we just got to a point where when I actually sat down and looked and realized that my entire part-time salary was paying for the part-time childcare at an institution, at a Montessori nice place. Yeah, that wasn't an option. And we all of a sudden we kind of panicked, and it was like, okay, who's in the neighborhood? Who do we trust? Who can watch our kids for a more affordable price? And that's just what we had to do, in that season. So it's hard, but you just kind of have to do some research. And if you're currently pregnant, the sooner you can start that research, the better.
Thanks, Lauren. How did the words that you say to families in difficult moments change after you became a parent? I know many of you touched on this kind of briefly, but kind of more specific stories maybe, or different insight. Go ahead, Laura.
If I could just kind of like sum up what I want to say instead of like talking for hours, but the reality is I just really listened better. I did a lot less talking, and I just really, really listened. And that is really important anyway, but you're listening for different things. You're listening for how this is really truly impacting the entire family, the extended family. You're just really listening at a deeper level. And so I am incredibly grateful for all the patients and families I've ever interacted with, because they have taught me so much. But really, once I became a parent, then I really started to listen better and understand the full picture of what was going on.
Yeah, so it's not so much what you learned to say, but how you learned to listen. Go ahead, Andie.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of that, I think, for me, I very much the same of just validating those feelings and emotions that you see too. I think, when I'm with parents that are, losing a child, I think not that it's a bad thing to say, like, I'm so sorry for your loss, but I think now I'm more aware of just validating, like, this is so hard, like what you're experiencing, and no parent should have to experience this. And I'm in this moment with you. I'm here with you. And again, kind of just that being willing to sit in that hard and not always have the perfect words to say, but I think just your presence, that becomes really important. So I think that just that awareness of what I'm saying, and just kind of validating what they're experiencing, I think for all of us, having when we're going through something hard, just sometimes feeling like somebody sees you in that, goes a long way.
I love that. Thank you, Andie. And then I think we have time for one, possibly two more questions, but kind of along the same lines. As a parent, do you always follow the advice that you gave to caregivers as a child life specialist before you had kids? I see Andrea and Laura.
I feel
Everyone's
like we
shaking
can
their heads.
probably, I feel like we've all given this answer already. If you want, I don't know if people have strong that they want to do other ones, but do we want to finish the last two instead?
Yes, the last two are actually specific to Laura
okay.
and Andrea. So maybe I'll have Lauren do this one, and then I'll have you both answer the next questions. So go ahead, Lauren.
No, I think it's so easy to think that with our background in child development that we know the best advice, and we have all of the answers. And while we all have best intentions with that advice, we are we are lucky as child life specialists because we also know that parents are the experts, right? And so I think that that is one of the most important things is parents know their children best. And still to this day, what I suggest to a parent is absolutely not necessarily what I do as a parent at home or what I would do at home with my own children. So everybody's different, everybody parents differently, and every child is different, and we all know that. But I think no. I definitely do not follow the advice that I previously gave to caregivers. So.
That's the common theme that I saw when everyone's heads were shaking. So if anyone feels like that out there, you are not alone, it looks like. Okay, so we for our last two pre-submitted questions, they're specific to Laura and to Andrea. So Laura, I'd like to know how you balance working from home and being a mom with your Children's Coping Connections job, and how many hours do you work per week from home?
Okay, logistically, about 3 years ago, I opened up my own private practice, and it's twofold. So it's not just because my kids are older now, and I really I want to be in the car with them. I want to hear about the high school drama, all the things that Andie said too. So that's one piece, but the reality is the second piece is I was working in a community ER that was 15 minutes away from my home and community that I live in, and so I saw a gap in service. I also have a really strong passion for long-term coping and therapeutic play. And so my desire to open up my own private practice and to fill a gap in my community has a lot to do with my passion, actually, and my work in child life previously that kind of got me to this point of understanding all of that. And then, yes, of course, it's always about my family is first. And so I work logistically from 8 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. when my youngest comes home from school. I take every Friday off and I work some Wednesdays, and I do a lot of contract work. And I always set my hours for what works best for my family. That is the key. So that is what I do. I work probably 25 to 30 hours, maybe more or less, depending on what my family needs are. And I'm learning and growing. I mean, even in private practice. So I don't know if that helps. I'm trying to think if I wrote any other notes. No, but yeah, you have to do what work. I mean, I can't not be a child life specialist. Like this is what I've wanted to do this since 10th grade, guys. So this is what I'm doing. And so it is, my husband's very aware of that. My children are very aware of that. That is what I do. And so, but within that, I'm having lots of conversations with my family all the time throughout my entire career of what works best for our family. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. And for Andrea, can you speak to your decision to leave the hospital setting and how you pivoted into social emotional learning?
Sure. So so I've been in this role since 2021. Back in 2020, I was working in outpatient clinics, and I was really enjoying my work with really working with parents and really talking to kids about how they can kind of continue these coping strategies outside of the hospital setting. And when COVID hit, our hospital wanted people to take furloughs. So I took a furlough as my oldest was entering kindergarten, because it was like a week before school started and nobody knew if it was going to be virtual, in person, or any of those things. So I took a furlough, and our school district actually has SEL as one of their specials. So they have social emotional learning as a special. So along with gym, art, music, he was receiving that virtually in kindergarten. So I was able to see what SEL was firsthand for kindergartners, and it was like just a light bulb moment. I mean, listening to what they were talking about expressing their feelings and coping skills and all of the things that I felt like we do every day, but in a less like medical only focus. So when I just kind of took that and I returned back to the hospital after my furlough was over, but kept my eye out for SEL opportunities. And I was honestly right place, right time. My county where I live has a grant in New Jersey that has 12 different schools in our county that are receiving SEL programming for free through this grant. I had to do a lot of advocating to get them to understand what Child Life was, and to be able, because initially they were just looking for master's level social workers. But I kept emailing and phone calling, and now our job description, I work with 3 other child life specialists, and our job description now, because we are looking for more people, if anyone wants to be in New Jersey, it says child life specialist certification preferred. So they kind of went from looking for social workers and counseling backgrounds to really seeing how awesome child life specialists are. So I honestly, I was like right place, right time in terms of that. But so many of the skills that I learned from my 12 years in the hospital just make sense in SEL and outside of the hospital. And so it's just been a really amazing opportunity. I know that there was like talk about daycare costs and different things like that. For me, it was a pay cut, but I was working 10 months. So I did not have to, for anyone who sends their children to camp, I no longer needed to spend $500 a week to send my children to camp every summer. I didn't need to go to Philadelphia, so no bridges, no city wage tax. So honestly, it was, on paper, it seemed like it was less money, but I actually got a raise by doing that. So health benefits were, it just made sense. So now I have summers off. I have the week between Christmas and New Year's off. So it just makes sense for my family. I feel like it just, what everyone else said, is just a decision that made sense for me. I was not burnt out of Child Life. I know that that's a theme in the field right now, but I would not say I was like a burnt out Child Life specialist when I left the hospital, but I was like burnt out from the commute and those hours and those sort of things more than the actual Child Life work. So now being able to do that work 15 minutes from my house without traffic is a beautiful thing.
That's awesome. I love that Child Life is now like a preferred profession to be able to go into what you're doing. So like you've already made so much change, as well in like your district space, which is awesome. So that's very, very cool. And I love that you also touched on the fact that you weren't burnt out going into this, because I think so many people talk about going into different community fields because of burnout. And so I love hearing from people that didn't have that same experience, that they just kind of happened because of life. And so thanks for sharing that as well. We so beautifully finished right at the 31 mark on our last question, which I am amazed by. So you guys did an incredible job, thoroughly yet concisely answering so many questions from all of our participants here today. We did not have time, obviously, for live Q&A. I believe I covered the questions that were put in the chat as they came up. There might have been one miss, but I took screenshots, so I'll make sure to see and double check that. For those that are closing out for today, just make sure to keep an eye out this afternoon or tomorrow for an email from me, which will include a link for the post survey. And once that's completed, I will send you your PDU certificate the following week. You only have 2 weeks to complete that post survey, so make sure that it's completed before the 24th, 2 weeks from today. And then for those that are going to be watching later as a recording, you will have to do the post survey as well as a quiz to prove that you watched the entire webinar. So keep that in mind as well. If you have any referrals of patients that would benefit from Child Life Services, please contact us or fill out a referral form listed here. If you have any questions from today, please email me. And I want to make sure to say thank you to all of our panelists. I hope that, like, you guys can see, our chat was just like blowing up with just so much gratitude and like paragraph like responses, just saying how impactful and helpful this was and how validating this was for so many other parents and CCLS who are out there. So thank you so much for your vulnerability today, for being willing to share and talk about this topic. It definitely seems to have proven to be a much needed discussion, and something that a lot of people needed to be validated and supported with. And I hope that people are leaving here feeling encouraged and excited about, all the different things to navigate, and that it's possible. Even though it's hard, it's possible. We have some great like some great people here who have, you know, made the impossible possible and are doing great things in child life while also being parents. So thank you so much for being here today, everybody. And thank you so much to Laura and Lauren and to Andrea and to Andie. Thank you guys for everything today. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and log off. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, thank you.